Hi everybody, and welcome back to video number 2 in chapter 4. Here we're going to be using activity-based costing for Comtech. And on number 1 here, Comtech Incorporated makes two products, a GPS system and a phone system. Number 2, the company has been losing bids to supply GPS systems to lower-priced competitors. And number 3, the company has been winning all bids to supply phone systems. Okay, so number 4, for the current year, Comtech has budgeted sales of 50,000 phone units and 200,000 GPS units. Number 5, Comtech's traditional cost system applies manufacturing overheads to products based on direct labor hours. And majority of companies, in my experience, do it just that way. But in this case, both products require 2 direct labor hours to complete. So if we walk that through, the number of hours, 50,000 units times 2 hours per unit, 100,000 hours, and 200,000 GPS units at $2 hours per unit, or 400,000. That gives me 500,000 direct labor hours total, which we use to estimate. So now the unit costs for materials and labor are direct materials for the phone is $90 and $20 for direct labor for the phone units, $50 direct materials for GPS, and $20 for direct labor for GPS. Now, the total manufacturing overhead costs for the current year are estimated at $10 million. The company develops the following overhead rate based on direct labor hours. So we simply take the $10 million and divide it by 500,000 direct labor hours. We get $20 per direct labor hour to get our predetermined overhead rate. Since each product requires 2 hours of direct labor, $40 of overhead is assigned to each product. 2 direct labor hours times $20 here and here. So our unit product cost for the phone is $150, and the unit product cost for the GPS unit is $110. Okay, now we'll take a look at computing activity rates for an activity-based costing system. Here, the ABC project team at Comtech developed the following basic information. And they've broken this $10 million of total overhead into its relative cost pools. Here's the labor-related, the machine-related, machine setups, production orders, parts administration based on part types, and general factory based on machine hours. So now my basic activity level for each of those is shown here. And now our expected activity for the phone and expected activity for the GPS. The expected activity for the GPS plus the expected activity for the phone will equal our total here. So you can see that is true across the page. Okay, now that we've broken that down into its pieces, we now can calculate our cost pool dollars per unit. All right, so here I take my estimated overhead cost, my expected activity. Now, this is where some students go afoul, and I'll just show you. Look, they are using the total expected activity here and the total estimated overhead here. So we haven't broken it down yet into the phone and the GPS. So here we're going to calculate $1.60 per direct labor hour, $2.10 per machine hour, $400 per machine setup, and $2,625 per production order, and $500 per part type. Quite a variance in the expected dollars in by each activity. All right, and of course then we do our general factory based on machine hours, the same machine hours that we used here. Okay, now that we've got that, we can apply that to our two products. Here's our expected activity and our activity rate and the amount of overhead that we're going to use on the phone units. So we use about half of the overhead costs assigned to the phone units. We divide that by the 50,000 phone units, and the overhead cost per unit is $97.80 per unit. All right. Then we do the same thing for the GPS units, and we calculate that through, and it's about half of the overhead costs at $5,110,000. And we divide that by the number of units, which is substantial, and the overhead cost per unit is $25.55. Okay, now we can compute product costs using activity-based costing. And what we do here is that our manufacturing overhead for the phone is $97.80, where for the GPS is $25.55. Direct labor is the same. I should say this is our traditional costing in these two columns here, which we calculated previously at $150 for the phone unit and $110 for the GPS unit. Now that varies dramatically with the calculation we just made using activity-based costing. Here, the unit cost, I should say, is $207.80 compared with $150. That's a $50 difference. And the GPS unit is, what, about $15 less expensive. So while the unit product cost of the GPS unit decreased from 110 to 95, the cost of the phone unit increased from 150 to $207.80. Now, that is a lot more work to make those calculations, and it would have to be worth your time to do that. In this case, it would clearly be worth their time to do that. So if we contrast the product costs computed under activity-based and conventional costing methods, here is a summary of what we just went through. And here is the $207.80 and the $95.55. The ABC activity-based costing system assigned $14.45 less overhead than the traditional system did to each GPS unit, whereas the direct labor or the traditional phone unit goes from $207 from $150. I think that's about $57.80 difference. In fact, it is. Okay. Now, what you see here is a general rule that says costs will shift from the high volume to the low volume products using activity-based costing. So the low volume product in this case was the phone unit, and the higher one was the GPS unit. You'll recall that we did 50,000 units of phone and 200,000 of GPS. So when a company implements that activity-based costing, once again, overhead costs shift from the high volume to the low volume products, with a higher product cost resulting for the low volume products, as it did here. Okay, now here is the high volume product, and you can see that the traditional system assigned the $40 of overhead to each phone or GPS unit, whereas the activity-based costing had $97.80 and $25.55 difference. So quite a little bit of difference in this case. $40. Okay. So activity orders, a production orders activity cost pool. Here's a batch level cost pool. The ABC system assigns different amounts of production order related overhead costs to each product. This fact can be illustrated in a two-step process. We'll compute the number of units processed per production order for each product. So here's the number of units produced per year, same numbers as we've been going through. Here's the number of production orders issued per year. Phone has twice as many as GPS does. And here are the number of units processed per production order. Quite a bit of difference here. This is maybe 4 times as, 6, 7, 8 times more than in GPS than phone units. Okay, let's see how that arithmetic spills out. Here, the cost of a production order is expensive, $2,625. Okay. Then the average number of units processed per production order, that's 62.5. And for GPS, we get a whole bunch more, 500. So the production order cost per unit is a whopping $42 for the phone units, while it's only $5.25 for the GPS unit. So you again notice that the costs are being shifted from the high volume GPS systems to the low volume phone systems. Okay. An ABC system can help identify areas where the company can benefit from improving its current processes, because we can now look more in a more focused way at targeting process improvements, because we have those costs broken down by activity. And so we can use this activity-based management to focus on managing the activities to eliminate waste and reduce processing time and defects. That looks like a good place for us to stop this video. And when we return, we'll take a look at step 1 in that targeting improvement process. Until that time, bye for now.